If IELTS reading feels a bit intimidating right now, you've come to the right place. In this video, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know to pass your IELTS reading exam with confidence. I've taken this test multiple times myself, first time to study in the UK. Although today my score is band 9, as a non-native speaker, I understand the struggles you might be facing. I'll guide you on how to use your English skills to the fullest to answer questions faster and more accurately. We'll cover time management strategies, some really cool tips and tricks, and even tackle the most difficult types of tasks together. And if you happen to make some mistakes along the way, no problem. I'll show you how you can learn from them and improve for your next test. It's Asia here. Let's get started. To manage your time well in IELTS reading, you need to know how IELTS reading is organized. Basically, you always have 3 sections. If you take the academic test, you have 3 passages, so it's very obvious, but if you take the general training test, you may have up to 5 passages because they are shorter. But in this case, you will have 2 in the first section, 2 in the second, and probably 1 longer text in the third. Why it's important? Well, because the official IELTS instructions read, spend about 20 minutes on each section. But I think this advice is problematic. Basically, the first section is always the easiest, and the last is always the most difficult. So you need more time to think about those questions, to look for your answers. And if you spend good 20 minutes to answer questions which are the easiest, then you won't have time to think about the harder questions. So if you want to get to a higher score, you need to answer questions more quickly, about 15 minutes for the first section, 20 for the second, and 25 for the third. You know, only in the last exam, I actually got that perfect band 9 score in IELTS reading. Before that, I got 8.5 several times, which means that I always made a couple of mistakes. And you know, every time I finish all 3 passages, all 3 sections, I have some questions I want to go back to, some questions I couldn't answer straight away. And I need time to look for those answers. So if you spend 15, 20, 25 minutes, that can bring you to about band 8, which is enough for all purposes. But if you really want to get a high score, then perhaps you need to answer questions even more quickly. Something like 12 minutes on the first section, 18 on the second, 23 on the third, and then you have those 7 minutes to think about the hardest questions you couldn't answer. So this is only for advanced IELTS test takers. But my previous advice is for everyone. Do not spend too much time on any single question. If you can't find the answer, if you don't understand what the answer is, mark it to review and move on. If you take the computer-based test, you can actually tick to review and the question will become round and you will know which ones you need to go back to. Basically, the vast majority of IELTS candidates can't answer all the questions correctly. There are mistakes and that's all right, because with this test, all you need is to pass it. If you pass it with an exceptionally good score, it doesn't really give you anything extra. You either get your visa or you don't get your visa. You either get that offer from a university or not. The university will not give you a better offer if you provide a test with a higher score. All you need is to meet the requirements. So let's talk how many questions you actually need to answer. So this is a table, and as you can see, there are numbers for academic and general training exams, and they are different. That's because academic texts are more difficult, they're more scientific, vocabulary there is more challenging. So you need to answer fewer questions to get to the same score. And some numbers are in bold and some are not. That's because the official IELTS information is limited. So that information is in bold, but I also wanted to show you what score you're gonna get for each number of answers. So I filled up this table and that information is not in bold, and this is my best guess. So if you need band 6, that's 23 questions in IELTS Academic and 30 in IELTS General Training. For band 7, that's 30 questions in IELTS Academic and 34 in General Training. Even for band 8, that's 35 questions in IELTS Academic and 38 in General Training, which means that there will be some mistakes, but that's alright as long as you can get to the score you need. There is an important difference between IELTS listening and reading, because in IELTS listening you have some time after the test to check your answers, to transfer them to the answer sheet, but you don't get any extra time in IELTS reading. You only get 60 minutes and that's it. So you need to make sure that all your answers are in the correct place. If you take a computer-based test, you select your answers on the screen directly, so that's easier. But if you take the paper-based test, then you need to transfer them to the answer sheet. And I think that you shouldn't be answering on the answer sheet straight away. You should use the question sheets, the brochure, to answer questions, and then you transfer your answers. Then you can concentrate on one activity at a time. And when you're transferring your answers, you should be thinking about the spelling of words and also the answer format, because sometimes you need to write down a word, but sometimes a letter. So you need to be thinking about that. And it's safest if you don't leave all that until the end of the test. So answer questions to the first section, transfer your answers. Second section, transfer your answers. Third section, transfer them. Or when there is 5 minutes before the end of the test, transfer all the answers you have until that moment and only then start thinking about the questions which you haven't answered by that point yet. Again, you need to manage time, and it's easier if you take the computer-based test because the timer will be on the screen. If you take a paper-based test, then you need to remember how much time is left. You will have a clock on the wall, so the moment the reading section begins, write down what time is on that clock. Otherwise, you may forget. And invigilators will only tell you when you have, I think, 10 minutes left, 5 minutes left, and 2 minutes. So they will not tell you you have 40 minutes left, you have 20 minutes left. You have to figure that out yourself. There are two main approaches to IELTS reading. The first is to read the passage and then answer the questions. The second is to answer questions as you're reading the passage for the first time. People who are fluent in English and can read fast can use any. But for those who aren't fluent yet, the second strategy can be much more beneficial. Here is what it involves. In IELTS reading, you can find answers to many questions in the same order as you see the questions. This means that you can read the first question and then read the text until you find the answer. Then read the next question, continue reading the passage until you find the next answer, and so on. In this case, you don't have to read all the passage attentively, which may take a lot of time. Instead, you read the question carefully and then you read quickly, ignoring things you don't understand perhaps, and just looking for that place where the answer is. Because you don't spend too much time trying to understand things which don't matter, you have more time to concentrate on sentences that do matter. I still remember one of the topics in my very first IELTS exam. It was about optics and how light is reflected by different surfaces. And I remember how difficult it was to understand some bits because I simply didn't know some key words. And I generally found the topic complex and confusing because I never liked physics. But I was still able to answer 35 questions in that test and got band 8. The trick is that some types of questions come in order, as I was describing, but others don't. And you need to know which is which. Then, as soon as you see a task, you know what to do. And it saves you a lot of time. For this video, I've analyzed a number of official IELTS practice tests and will tell you which question types tend to come in order and which don't and what you should do then. Please note that there is no guarantee that your test will be exactly like that. But as far as I can see at the moment, the types of questions that come in order are missing words. This is one of the most common types of tasks in IELTS reading. The task reads, complete the notes below. Choose one word only. And then you see gaps, which you need to fill in with the missing words from the passage. The task may look slightly differently. You may need to complete the table below or complete a summary. Whatever it is, as soon as you see these gaps, you know that you need to find some missing words. And the answers in the passage come in the same order as the questions. With this question type, be careful with the number of words. Sometimes you may need to choose one word only, and sometimes one or two words, so don't exceed the limit. The second question type that comes in order is the notorious true, false, not given, which is used in every test. Here you need to say if the following statement agrees with the information in the passage or not. These questions almost always come in order. A similar type of questions is yes, no, not given. Here you need to say if the following statements agree with the claims of the writer. So these questions are about opinions and not information like true, false, not given, but generally they're very similar. And in most cases, the answers do come in order. Occasionally, when you get this task at the very end of your reading section, they may not. But in other instances, they do. By the way, don't worry about writing anything down. If you go to my Telegram channel, you can download the images with all the question types that come in order and that don't come in order and use them for your reference later. The channel is called Fast Track IELTS, and if you search for the hashtag FT10, you get straight to these images. The next question type that comes in order is sentence endings. Here, you need to complete each sentence with the correct ending. And there are some other questions where you need to match information, but this is the only one that comes in order. Next, multiple choice questions. If you see several questions with 3 or 4 options A, B, C, D, and you need to select one correct answer, these questions come in order. Please note that sometimes you may need to find 2 correct answers out of 5 options, and those answers may not come in order, but we'll talk about them later. Answers that do not come in order. Okay, let's talk about all the questions where answers do not come in the same order as questions are asked. In many cases, What you can do instead is to read one paragraph and see if it answers any questions. Then read the next paragraph and so on. So what question types do not come in order? Matching information questions. There are several types of questions where you need to match something, and probably the best known is matching headings. Usually, this type of question comes before the passage. I mean, in a paper-based exam, first you see the task, it takes the whole page, and then the passage comes on the next page, and the task reads, choose the correct heading for each section from the list of headings below. And headings are in a box numbered using the Roman numerals, and a list of paragraphs or sections is underneath. And you need to find a suitable heading for each paragraph or each section. Obviously, the first heading will not be about the first paragraph. They don't come in order. And my strategy for this type of question is to read the first paragraph, then read all the headings, find the right one, read the second paragraph, match it to its heading, and so on. And I suggest matching all the headings first and then transferring all your answers to the answer sheet. That's because in this task, you may want to change some of your answers as you go. Matching paragraphs. This task is slightly different. It reads, which paragraph or section contains the following information? If in matching headings, you need to match each section of the passage with its heading. In matching paragraphs, you may have just 4 or 5 questions. And they're usually located right after the passage they belong to. Again, I find that the best way to answer this type of question is to read a paragraph, find the answer, read the next paragraph, find the answer, and so on. It seems that if you have, let's say, 4 statements, you'll be able to match them with the first 4 paragraphs, just not in order. And that means that you will answer the remaining questions using information in the remaining paragraphs which you haven't read yet. And in this case, you will answer all the questions about the passage by reading it only once. There is one little thing you should pay attention to. In some tasks, you can use each section only once, but sometimes you may need to use some paragraphs twice. Then you will read, you may use any letter more than once. Check if that's the case in your task. If it is, you will definitely use one of the letters more than once. Matching information. Quite often you need to match surnames of people with what they did. Like in this task, match each statement with the correct explorer. And if you see this type of task, highlight all the surnames in the text. Then you'll be able to find the part of the text where the answer is located very quickly. Actually, you can read about the explorers in the text in the same order as you can find their surnames on the list. So Hardy is first, but he's not on the list at all. But then we have Peter Fleming, Wren, Chris, Robin, and finally Wilfred. So statements are not in order, of course. Read information about one explorer and then match it with the correct statement. Read information about the next explorer and so on. To summarize, matching headings, matching paragraphs, and matching information do not come in order. However, matching sentence endings usually does. Multiple choice questions with 5 options and 2 correct answers. The task reads, choose 2 letters from A to E. And here you'll see 5 options. 2 are correct. And some of these come in order and some don't, and it really varies. Questions at the end of the reading test usually don't come in order. if you have a couple of questions at the very end of your reading test. They usually don't come in order, whatever type of questions you may find there. The last few questions are usually the trickiest, and it's just one more way to make it more difficult for you. If you see yes, no, not given questions about the last passage, particularly at the end, then they usually don't come in order either. Basically, everything I told you in this video are the general rules that I deduced from the official practice tests and from the real tests by paying attention to where I could find my answers. There is no guarantee that your tasks will be built in this exact way. But even if some of them are different, this strategy can still help you find answers more quickly, giving you a chance to answer more questions. Don't forget to see the images with the lists of questions that come in order and that don't come in order on our Telegram channel. Now that you've learned more about IELTS reading in general, it's time to dive into how you can tackle the most challenging types of tasks. By the end of this, you'll be equipped with the strategies you need to confidently solve any task that comes your way. For each type of task, we'll work through some practice tasks together, so you get hands-on experience as we go along. Ready? Well, almost all IELTS tests have at least one set of true, false, not given or yes, no, not given questions. And sometimes you just have one set, but sometimes you have a set of these questions in each section of your test, so you have 3 sets. It really depends. But it seems that true, false, not given questions are usually in the first or second sections of your test. And yes, no, not given is usually in the third or sometimes in the second section. Now let's talk about the answer formats. And what I'm about to say will surprise you. Okay, if you need to answer true, false, not given, you can write 4 words, and you can write them in small letters, in capital letters, or capitalize the first letter. It really doesn't matter. But if the answer is true, and by mistake you write yes, it will be counted as a correct answer. Even if you answer just Y instead of true, it's still a correct answer. And I found this information in the official IELTS video. I know that many of you are surprised to hear that, so I will link this video in the description. And I'm also not saying that you should answer Y instead of true. I'm just saying if you make this silly error, it won't affect your score. But yes, it is safer to just write true or false. And of course, all that is only for those who take the paper-based exam. Because if you take the computer-based test, you simply click on true or false. You don't need to type anything. Another tip for you is that you will likely use all 3 answers. True, false, not given questions usually come in sets of 4 or 5 questions, sometimes up to 9 questions. And it seems that at least 1 will be true, 1 will be false, and 1 will be not given. In the last test I took, I had 6 questions. 2 were true, 2 were false, 2 were not given. Of course, I can't guarantee that you will have the same distribution. It may not be the case in your test, but there is a good probability that you will use all 3 answers. For example, you have 5 questions. 2 are true, 2 are false. What do you think the 5th answer is? I would say there is a very good chance it's not given. In order to answer true, false, not given questions, first of all, you should locate the answer. You need to find that sentence or sentences which contain your answer. Okay, so first of all, you read the question. The good thing is that true, false, not given questions come in order. You can read the first question, you start reading the passage, then you find your answer, you read the next question, you resume reading the passage, and so on. So many questions in IELTS reading actually come in order. Some don't, but many do, and I have a separate video about it. I will link it below. You can do it with true, false, not given questions. Almost all of them, but not those that come at the very end of their test. These are questions number 38, 39, 40. Sometimes you have several true, false, not given or yes, no, not given questions. So those may not come in order. All others usually do. Okay, so you read the first question. You need to underline keywords to remember what you're actually looking for. If you have any names, surnames, dates, that's great. They will help you locate the answer. But even if you have a surname, I still think that you should read the whole passage. You just don't need to read it slowly, trying to understand everything. You can read it fast, looking for your answer, but you will still get the general idea of what it's about. Okay, when you find where the answer is, you slow down and you look for your answer. Sometimes you can find the exact keyword in the question and in the text. But quite often, those are paraphrased. So don't look for exact keywords. Look for paraphrasing. Once you've located the correct bit of the passage, you need to answer your question. And how easy or difficult it is to answer your question depends on where in the test you found it. Questions in the first section are usually the easiest, and quite often you can find your answer in a single sentence. Those in the second section are more difficult, and sometimes you need to read 2 or even 3 sentences to answer. And those in the third section are the hardest, and you may need to read the whole paragraph to answer a single question. Be prepared for that. Now I've prepared for you several practice questions, but before we begin, I just want to give you several tips. The first one is, remember that the devil is in detail. You really need to be very careful and compare each part of your question and answer to make sure that the meaning is exactly the same. Cross out irrelevant bits, don't rush, make sure it's all correct. If it's false, there should be a direct contradiction, and it should be quite strong. Not some tiny thing like a few people and several people, like that's the same. There should be a strong contradiction. And if you've been looking for your answer and you really can't find it, perhaps it's not given. Okay, I have several practice questions of different level of difficulty. Please count how many you answer correctly and then post your result in the comments below. Let's dive in. Let's begin with some questions from the first section. First of all, you should read the title. Why we need to protect polar bears? Now we know that the whole passage is about polar bears. Here is the first question. Now please pause this video and try to find the answer yourself, and then resume once you're ready. Ready? Let's have a look together. In this question we have a surname Liu, and it would definitely help us to locate the correct sentences in the passage. Here they are. Now we should carefully compare each part of the statement with that in the passage to see if the meaning is the same and the answer is true, or if there is a direct contradiction and the answer is false, or we simply don't have the information to say if the statement is true or false and the answer is not given. Let's have a look at the question. The study done by Liu and his colleagues compared different groups of polar bears. So I've highlighted the key parts. Now let's read the passage. A 2014 study by Shiping Liu and his colleagues sheds light on this mystery. Okay, we have the same study. They compared, here we have the same word. They compared the genetic structure of polar bears with that of their closest relatives from a warmer climate, the brown bears. If you don't understand some of the words, it's okay. Just try to understand the meaning and try to find the key words. So they compared polar bears with brown bears. But the question says that they compared different groups of polar bears. So what's the answer? The answer is false, because we have a direct contradiction. Here is the next question. Please pause the video and try to find the answer. Ready to continue? Let's read the question first. So I split it into several parts. The polar bear's mechanism for increasing bone density. So polar bears have a certain mechanism that increases something in bones. Even if you don't know the word density, you can still deal with the question. So this mechanism could also be used by people one day. Let's read the passage. What's in the passage? If the mechanism of bone remodeling in polar bears. So some words match mechanism and bone, and we can see that it's a mechanism of something that's happening in bears' bones. So it's safe to say that they're talking about the same mechanism. If this mechanism can be understood, many bedridden humans and even astronauts, humans and astronauts are people, could potentially benefit. Could benefit is the same as could also be used, and potentially means one day. So both are talking about a possibility in the future. This means that the meaning of the statement is exactly the same as the meaning of the sentence in the passage. So the answer is true. Now let's have a look at some more difficult questions from section 3. The title is How to Make Wise Decisions. Here is a question. Please pause the video and try to find the answer. Ready to continue? First of all, we need to locate where the answer is in the passage. So let's read the statement. Students participating in the job prospects experiment. Okay, so we are looking for some information about the job prospects experiment. Let's read this paragraph. For example, in one experiment, so they are talking about an experiment that took place during the peak of a recent economic recession, graduating college seniors. Graduating college seniors are still students, right? Let's read on. They were asked to reflect on their job prospects. Job prospects. And we're looking for some information about job prospects experiment. That's good. So that's the passage that we need. Now let's find the answer. Let's read the statement again to understand what the actual question is. Students participating in the job prospects experiment could choose one of two perspectives to take. So this means that there were two perspectives, whatever those are, and they can choose one of them. So let's continue reading the passage. Students were instructed to imagine their career either as if they were a distant observer or before their own eyes as if they were right there. So these are the two perspectives they're talking about in the question. In the question, they say that they could choose one of the two perspectives. But here, so far, we've read that they were instructed to imagine, but we don't know if they were told what to imagine or if they could choose. So let's continue reading further. Participants in the group assigned to the distant observer. Here, they were assigned to this group. This means they were allocated. They couldn't choose. So this is a direct contradiction, and this means that the answer is false. Here is the fourth question. Please pause the video and try to find the answer. Ready to continue? Let's have a look at our statement first. What are we looking for? In the couples experiments, the length of the couples relationships had an impact on the results. So in the passage, we're looking for some information about experiments with couples. Let's have a look at the paragraph. In another study, couples. Okay, so this is about an experiment with couples. So this is the correct paragraph. Now, what's the question? Let's have a look at the statement again. In the couples experiments, the length of the couples' relationships had an impact on the results. Okay, so the statement says that depending on whether couples have been together for a long time or they just met recently, they had different results in the experiment. Let's read the paragraph and find out if it's true or not. In another study, couples in long-term romantic relationships were instructed to visualize and so on. Okay, so they are talking about relationships, but actually they are saying that in this experiment, all couples were in long-term romantic relationships. They've been together for a long time. And if you finish reading this paragraph, you will find out that this is the only mention of the length of relationships. There is nothing about couples in short-term relationships. So the statement says that the length of relationships had an impact on the results. But what's the answer? Well, we don't know if couples who met each other recently had any different results because they were not part of this experiment. The answer is not given. You know, quite often, if you can't find the answer anywhere, this means that it's not given. Here is the next question. Let's read it together. In both experiments, the participants who looked at the situation from a more detached viewpoint tended to make wiser decisions. They're talking about the two experiments we just read about, with students and couples. Can you answer this question straight away? If the answer is no, and you would like to read the two paragraphs again, here they are. Please pause the video and try to find the answer. Okay, let's continue. Let's have a look at this statement again. In both experiments, the participants who looked at the situation from a more detached viewpoint tended to make wiser decisions. Okay, so those who looked from a more detached viewpoint, they looked from the side, they made wiser or better decisions. Now let's have a look if that's the case. In the first paragraph, we can find that participants in the group assigned to the distant observer role. So distant observer is someone with a more detached viewpoint. They displayed more wisdom-related reasoning, or in simple terms, they made better decisions. They made wiser decisions. Okay, let's have a look at the next paragraph. Couples in the other's eyes condition. So they have a more detached viewpoint. They were significantly more likely to rely on wise reasoning, or they tended to make wiser decisions. So what's the answer? Okay, the answer is true. In both experiments, participants who looked from a more detached viewpoint tended to make wiser decisions. There was a lot to read, but could you perhaps answer this question straight away without reading the two paragraphs again? I guess some of you could. And that's why I suggest reading all the passages in your IELTS reading test and not just scanning for the keywords. If you get the main idea of the passage, you're more likely to answer questions like that straight away and save a lot of time. And don't worry, you're not gonna get many questions of this level of difficulty. This one comes at the end of the third section, so this is one of the most difficult questions in the IELTS reading test. We can say it's a Band 9 question. How did it go? Now, let's talk about another task that is just as challenging as true-false not given questions, if not more, the matching headings task. First of all, let me show you the task. Choose the correct heading for each paragraph from the list of headings below. And then you see a box with your headings. In the IELTS test, you will always see Roman numerals next to them. And then your questions are at the bottom, from 14 to 20, and each question represents one paragraph or one section. You will always find more options than questions. For example, 6 questions with 8 options or 7 questions with 9 options. And matching headings is usually located in the second or third section of your test where questions are already more difficult. In a paper-based exam, you can actually find this task before the passage, and this is the most intuitive way to approach it, to match headings as you're reading the passage for the first time. So here are the steps I follow whenever I see matching headings. First of all, read the passage title to figure out what this text is about. Then, read all the headings. Highlight keywords. Then, quickly read the first paragraph. Don't try to understand everything, just read to get the general idea of what it's about. And then, try to find the answer. Read all the headings again and choose the one that matches the first paragraph. It's quite likely that you won't be able to find all the matches straight away. This task takes time. So here are a few tips that will help you get through. If you're hesitating between 2 options, write down both answers on your question sheet, not on your answer sheet, of course. If you're not certain about an answer, put a question mark. If you can't find the answer, move on. You return to this question later. Once you're done with the first paragraph, read the second, try to find the matching heading, and so on. And by the way, cross out any headings that you've already used. You should go through all the questions and then come back to those you couldn't answer or were not certain about. Not spending too much time on any single question and instead coming back to them is key to success in this task. Why? Well, if you were hesitating between 2 options before, now there is a good chance that one of them is taken and the answer becomes obvious. Or if you have a couple of unanswered questions but far fewer options to choose from, you may be able to find answers you couldn't see before. Also, remember I told you to put a question mark next to any answers you're not certain about. Here is why. If you've chosen an incorrect answer to one of the questions, it will prevent you from answering another question correctly. So if you can't find the answer, check among the headings you've already used, particularly those you were not certain about. And finally, match all the headings on the question sheet and then transfer your answers to the answer sheet. If you're taking a computer-based exam and you know that you usually struggle with this task, you may wish to match all the headings on the sheet of paper you're given and then select your answers on your computer. There are also a couple of things you should be careful about in this task. Don't read only the first sentence or the first and last sentence of each paragraph. Reading them can give you a general idea of what this paragraph is about, but it won't help you match headings. This task is built in such a way that you must read everything to find correct answers. Don't look for exact words either. Look for the main idea. If the option is correct, then the main keywords will be paraphrased. That's the way IELTS test writers create these tests. And if you can see some matching keywords, probably this option is wrong, so they didn't bother changing them. Now, let me show you several questions from an official test and let's use them to practice. Ready? Okay, here is the first question. Please go ahead, pause the video and find the answer. Ready to continue? The answer is a proposal to take control away from the driver. Why? I think the answer is mainly at the end of the paragraph. When we are reading about the radical idea that has been suggested, well, that's a proposal. Then, directly regulating the speed and spacing of individual cars with central computers and sensors that communicate with each car's engine and brake controls. So computers communicate with the engine and brakes, not the driver. So to take control away from the driver. That's the answer. Ready for the next question? Please pause the video now. Okay, the answer is areas of doubt and disagreement between experts. Here is why. This whole paragraph is about the differences of opinion between civil engineers and physicists or experts. And it describes how they have very different views. So some keywords are skepticism or they questioned. So we have doubt and disagreement. Here is the next question. Please pause the video now. Ready to continue? The answer is the impact of driver behavior on traffic speed. Let's read this bit. When a driver in a fast lane brakes a little, the shock wave travels back much more rapidly. Each following driver has to react more quickly. Consequently, or as a result, as the road becomes congested or full of cars, the faster moving traffic is the first to slow down. So this is a description of the impact of driver behavior on traffic speed, or what happens when one driver brakes a little. Now is the perfect time to discuss two other matching questions. Matching information, also called matching sections or paragraphs, and matching features. While the former may feel similar to matching headings, it requires different skills to find the answers. Let's take a closer look at it. Let's start with the matching information task. In this reading passage 2, you are given 5 sections to read through. Your task is to figure out which section contains certain information based on a set of statements provided below. Now, this type of question might remind you of matching headings questions, but there is an important difference between them. In matching headings, you need to find the main idea of each paragraph, which requires you to read everything. On the other hand, with matching information, you're asked to locate specific details within those sections. So it's more about finding certain information. How do you go about solving matching information questions? Our goal is to find answers quickly without getting lost in all the information. So here is my strategy. First, read the passage title to get an idea of what it's about. Secondly, look out for this note. You may use any letter more than once. In theory, this means that you're allowed to use the same option A, B, or C multiple times. But what I've discovered is that most likely one of the sections contains 2 answers. Next, carefully read through all the questions, highlighting any relevant keywords, and try to memorize what each question is about. Don't spend too much time learning questions, but pay attention. Then go to the passage and read the first section or part of the section if it's long. Return to your questions and check if any of them have been mentioned and mark your answers. Remember that not all sections contain an answer. So it's okay if you don't find anything relevant in the first section. In this case, move on to the next section and keep repeating the process until you found all the answers. If you finish the passage and you haven't found some of the answers and have no idea where they were, move on. Return to these questions only after you answer the rest, as it may take a lot of time. Now it's time to try this strategy in practice. I've prepared for you some questions from Cambridge Practice Test 17, Test 2. And I recommend using these tests for your practice because they're just like the real exam. Please count how many questions you answer correctly and post your result in the comments at the end. Let's see how well you can cope with this task. And here is section A. Yes, it's pretty long. To start, read the title, find the keywords, then read the section and compare it to the questions below. If that's too much to read, read the first half and then the second half. Go ahead and pause the video now. Have you found your answer? Let's continue. I found this bit at the very beginning. It took at least 3,000 years for humans to learn how to domesticate the wild tomato and cultivate it for food. Now, two separate teams in Brazil and China have done it all over again in less than 3 years. And they have done it better in some ways. This is question 17, a comparison between the early domestication of the tomato and more recent research. Here is the second section. Pause the video now. Done? This answer is spread over several sentences. Wild tomatoes produce pea-sized fruits. People transformed the plant, which resulted in desirable traits or features, such as larger fruits. Sometimes the desirable mutations come with less desirable traits. For instance, the tomatoes grown for supermarkets have lost much of their flavor. Now you know why our tomatoes are so tasteless. The answer is 15b, an explanation of how problems can arise when focusing only on a certain type of tomato plant. Basically, they try to grow large tomatoes, and the problem is now they are tasteless. Before we look into the matching features questions, I want you to try one more section because there is something unusual here. Please pause the video now. Ready? The section discusses what changes were made in newly domesticated tomatoes. And then we read, they're quite tasty, a little bit strong, and very aromatic. The answer is 18C, a personal reaction to the flavor. Have you found anything else? How about this? They managed to create a strain or a kind of tomatoes resistant to a common disease called bacterial spot race. And in question 14, we're looking for a type of tomato that can resist a dangerous infection. To resist an infection is paraphrased as resistant to a disease. The next question type has a really useful trick that can help you a lot. It's matching features where you need to match a set of questions or statements 19, 20, 21 to a list of options in the box A, B, C. Quite often, in this type of task, you need to match research findings to a list of researchers. That's common in IELTS Academic. In IELTS General Training, you may have a list of professions or kinds of sports. So what's the strategy? Firstly, the questions which have numbers are not in order. So don't try to answer question 19 and then 20, 21. It doesn't work. The good news is that options are in order. So first you read about Kutha, then Gao, then Vanek. There is a complication though. You may read about the same researcher several times. So you definitely find Kutha first and Gao second. But then you may read about Kutha and Gao again before you get to Vanek. It still helps. To start, just like with matching information questions, carefully read all the questions and highlight keywords. Now, here is how you can answer these questions faster. Scan the passage for options. In our case, surnames. In many question types, scanning doesn't work because when you scan the text, you don't get an understanding of what this passage is about. But in matching features, that's fine as long as you have very specific options like surnames or professions. When you find an option mentioned, slow down and carefully read the information about it. Check if any of the questions match this information. Then scan for the next option. Let me show you how it works in practice. We're going to use the same passage about tomatoes. These questions come after the matching information questions you've just completed. So my tip is, when you start a new section, check all the question types. If we'd done that, all your surnames would have already been highlighted and the beginning of the passage would look like this. Can you see where you should start reading? Go ahead, pause the video and find your answers. Here is the first clue. There are 50,000 edible plants or plants we can eat in the world, but 90% of our energy comes from just 15 crops. And we have question 23. Humans only make use of a small proportion of the plant food available on Earth. Indeed, there are 50,000 plants and we mainly eat 15 of them. We don't make use of the other plants. Answer 23A. Information about the second scientist, Kai-Xie Gao, doesn't match any of the questions. He's just saying that they may domesticate new plants, but among similar questions, we're looking for the adaptation to future environmental challenges or domestication of one wild fruit. So that's not it. The next section. Not a single researcher has been mentioned here. We can skip it. In this section, we can read about Kutha. Pause the video now. Ready? Well, there are no answers here. I kept this section deliberately to show you that you may read paragraph after paragraph without finding any answers, and it doesn't mean you've missed something. Next. Joyce Vanek. I promise there is an answer. You know the drill. Pause the video now. Let's continue. So, Vanek decided to domesticate the ground cherry or golden berry. There is potential for this to be a commercial crop, says Vanek. But she adds that taking the work further would be expensive. Have a look at 22. Efforts to domesticate one wild fruit are limited by the costs involved. It's expensive. And now we have 3 questions left and 3 small paragraphs. Can you do that? Pause the video now. Okay, Jonathan Jones thinks it will be hard for new foods to grow so popular with farmers and consumers that they become new staple crops. A staple crop is rice, for example. We eat a lot of it. So the answer is 20D. The idea of growing and eating unusual plants may not be accepted on a large scale. They may not become our staples. Next, Gao says they could create crops that will thrive or grow really well even as the planet warms. Have a look at question 19. Domestication of certain plants could allow them to adapt to future environmental challenges when the planet warms. And finally, Kutha didn't want to reveal or say publicly Which species were in his team's sights? The answer is 21A. It's not advisable for the future direction of certain research to be made public. Okay, you can find multiple choice questions in sections 2 and 3 of the IELTS reading test. There are two types of them: questions with 4 options and 1 answer, and questions with 5 options and 2 answers. In questions with 1 correct answer, you must choose between 4 options: A, B, C, or D. In the other type, you must choose 2 letters from 5 options. One type of these questions is much more complex than the other, but let's examine the strategies for both of them, beginning with questions with 1 answer. These usually come in sets of 3 to 5 questions and may be in section 2 or 3. One of the most helpful tips is knowing this. Multiple choice questions with 1 answer come in the same order as the information is presented in the passage. This means that you can read the first question, find the answer, then read the next question, find the answer, and so on. If you do that, you always know what exactly you're looking for. And if you'd like to learn which IELTS reading questions come in order and which don't, watch this video linked below. Getting back to our questions. I've tried different ways of answering them, and this one seems to work best for me. So let's see if it works for you. First of all, carefully read the question and highlight the keywords that can help you locate the answer. Actually, quite a few of these questions tell you exactly where it is. In the first paragraph or in the second paragraph. Some don't. Have a look at question 29. We have a surname, Pachidi. Surnames are always keywords. Highlight them. In texts about research, there may be several different pieces of research by one scientist. We're interested in the one about telecommunications. In question 30, the keyword is Erwan Mikoy. In a paper-based exam, just underline your keywords. In a computer-based test, select the word, right-click, highlight. Before you start reading the passage, briefly look through the options. Don't spend too much time, just skim through to get a feel of what you're going to read about. Then go to the passage, find the first paragraph you need, and read it. When you get back to the question and read the options again, you may still be unable to answer it, and that's expected. That's why you should assess each option. All or most of the options are usually discussed in the passage. You should take each option one by one and compare it to the information in the passage. Eliminate or cross out incorrect options. This will help you narrow down your choices and increase your chances of selecting the correct answer. Look for synonyms, as words in the text are usually paraphrased, not repeated. And lastly, make sure you read all the options before making your final choice, as sometimes the correct answer may not be the first one that comes to mind. Let's do 2 practice tasks together to see how the strategy works in practice, and then we'll talk about the most complex type of multiple choice questions. But first, a question from section 2. You've seen it before. Go ahead, pause the video and find the answer. Ready to continue? Let's assess each option. A. They adapt quickly to the environment. Actually, I can't find anything about it. Let's leave it for now. What about B? The risk they pose has been exaggerated or made larger than it really is. Here I found this. We mess with them at our peril. To mess with something means to get involved or deal with something harmful and perilous danger. So this is the opposite of option B. Cross it out. C. They're more plentiful in animal life than plant life. Or there are more microbes in animals than plants. Is it true? Our passage says that they are everywhere in animals and plants. So we don't know if animals have more microbes or not. This means this option is incorrect. Finally, D. They will continue to exist for longer than the human race. Indeed, in the passage I found this. They will outlive us. They will live longer than us, the human race. Option D is our answer. If we think about our options, some statements are clearly wrong, but sometimes there is no information to confirm if the statement is right or wrong. The information is not given in the passage. This means this is an incorrect option because we are looking for a statement that has the same meaning as the passage. Now, let me show you a slightly different type of question from section 3, where questions tend to be harder. Pause the video and find the answer. Ready? What did Pachidi observe? Here, options are quite similar, so it may be helpful to find the differences. Steph disagreed with AI, artificial intelligence, felt resentful or bitter and angry, or they made sure AI produced the results they wanted, or they allowed AI to carry out the tasks instead of themselves. In this example, each option is not discussed in the passage. Rather, we need to read it all to get the general idea. I haven't found anything really about options A, B, or D, but we've got this. People develop strategies to make the algorithm work to their own advantage. And the same idea is confirmed again. They feed the algo with false data to reach their targets. This means they make sure AI produces the results that they want. Before we look at the second type of these questions, I'd like to remind you that if you're looking for a step-by-step IELTS study plan with links to all the resources, you can download mine in the description. It's free. Okay, questions with 5 options and 2 answers. Each of the answers gives you 1 point. These questions are usually at the end of section 2, and you may get either 1 set of questions worth 2 points or 2 sets of questions worth 4 points. Despite being in section 2 rather than 3, I find that these questions may be even harder than those in the last section. Here's why. In IELTS reading, answers to multiple choice questions with 2 answers may be anywhere in the passage. These questions are usually in section 2. So first, you may find a set of matching headings, or matching sections questions, which require reading the whole passage to answer them. Then you get another type of questions, for example, filling the blanks. And finally, at the very end of the section, our questions come. So you're expected to have read everything, and the answers may be anywhere. Let me show you. Have a look at this question, just the question itself. Which of the 2 following statements does the writer make about the discoveries of the Barnett's team? The surname will help us locate the answer, right? Not quite. By the time you get to this question, you've already solved a set of matching sections questions, so you've read the passage. And if you were following my advice, you've highlighted the keywords in the text. Names, dates, names of theories, and so on. So here is the passage and our keyword. The whole text is about Barnett and his team, apart from perhaps the first 2 sections, A and B. Because there is too much to read, I'm just going to show you where I found the answers directly. Each option was discussed, mainly in sections D, E, and F, but we had no way of knowing there would be nothing in C. And the last option about Auckland, which turned out to be incorrect, was mentioned all over the passage. So you can see the word Auckland highlighted in red. I've color-coded the options and where you can find the description in the passage. So if you'd like to look into this question on your own, go ahead, pause the video now. But together, let's solve the next one, or to be precise, the next two. In the question, the keywords are the Viking Age, and I found the section about the Viking Age for you. It's G. In the next section, H, the writer is discussing prehistory, and the dates highlighted in green are different to those during the Viking Age. So that's why we know that our answers are in section G. Now, go ahead, pause the video and find the answers. Ready to continue? Let's look at each option one by one. Option A. Hunters at this time benefited from an increased demand for goods. Indeed, we can read about a booming demand for hides and antlers. The business must have been good for hunters. Yes, the meaning is the same. Option A is correct. Option B is about the greatest growth in the wealth of Vikings, but I couldn't find anything about it. Let's move on. Option C, Vikings didn't rely on ships alone to transport goods. Indeed, in the paragraph, we can read that we usually think about ships, but plenty of goods traveled on overland routes. This option is correct. Actually, we've already found the two answers. If I were short of time, I'd perhaps move on to the next question at this point. But if we decide to check each option, well, option D. Norwegian towns attracted traders from around the world. And we know they were trading with Europe and Middle East. But around the world, no information. Option E. Vikings were primarily interested in their trading links with the Middle East. Again, according to the text, although they traded with the Middle East, we don't know which area the Vikings were mainly interested in. As you can see, some of the questions with two options require searching all over the passage, while others can be answered by carefully examining just one paragraph. I find that these section 2 questions are pretty tricky and may require a lot of time. If you can't find your answers quickly, answer questions from part 3 and then return to these questions. Multiple choice questions with two answers are more common in the academic reading, while those with one answer are used in both types of test. What's the key to improving your IELTS reading score? Well, it lies in identifying your weaknesses and addressing them. Let me show you how. First of all, we need reliable practice tests that have the same level of difficulty as the real IELTS test. Basically, you need official Cambridge practice tests. Any recent book, let's say from 14 and up, will do. Right now, I want you to do a full reading practice test without a timer. Take as much time as you need. Why no timer? Well, because the time pressure adds quite a lot of complexity to the test. And it's useful to know how many questions you can answer without this external pressure. Write down your answers on a sheet of paper and check them. How many questions could you answer correctly? That's the table that shows the equivalent band scores. In IELTS General Training, texts are easier, so you need to answer more questions to get the same score. For example, for Band 7, you need 30 answers in academic and 34 in general training. For Band 8, 35, and 38, respectively. The first step to improving your performance is understanding your mistakes. Check each incorrect answer one by one. Go back to the test, find the correct answer, and try to understand why this answer is correct and not yours. There may be a few reasons. One of them is as simple as overthinking. Yes, you do need to analyze the text and carefully check that the meaning in the question is the same as in the passage. However, virtually all correct answers are paraphrased. And paraphrasing never produces 100% match. The meaning should be close enough. Don't dig deeper and deeper. Once you found the answer, go for it. You may notice that you find certain types of tasks particularly challenging. For example, true, false, not given, yes, no, not given questions are among the toughest. And finding not given answer may be particularly tricky because, well, it's not given. Remember that questions of this type come in order. Read the first statement, start reading the passage until you find the answer, then read the second statement, and so on. For not given questions, you should still locate the part discussing the same topic as in the statement. If you find it, but your answer is not there, and then the topic changes, then the answer is not given. If you can't find anything at all, you've probably missed the relevant part of the text. Basically, if you find certain types of questions difficult, learning relevant strategies can help you improve. Find out how these questions are built, how to look for answers. I have videos about all the toughest types of questions. If you've learned a certain technique but it's not helping, try another technique. We all are different, and what works for a lot of people may not work for you. Keep an open mind. If you struggle with certain types of questions, find more questions of this type and practice. You may notice that you spend a lot of time looking for information. In this case, it may help to learn which questions come in order and which don't. Most IELTS reading questions come in order, which means that you can read a question, start reading the passage until you find the answer, read the next question, and so on, just as I described previously. But for example, matching heading questions don't come in order, but you can still read one paragraph, match it to the statement, to the heading, read the next paragraph, and so on. In this case, you know exactly what you're looking for at any moment of time. Otherwise, the length of passages may be simply overwhelming. Another technique that can help you locate your answers is highlighting keywords. Highlight the most important words in your questions. They will help you concentrate on what you're looking for. Highlight names, dates, and locations in the passage in case you need them later. If you can't find several answers straight away, this is okay. Usually I finish 3 passages with 2-3 questions unanswered because I either didn't find answers straight away or I couldn't understand what the answer was. Just leave them and finish other questions and then come back to those at the end if you still have time left. Another reason why you may not be able to answer a certain question is if you simply don't know the words which determine the answer. This may happen, and this is a direct reflection of your English skills. IELTS reading actually requires the widest vocabulary of all IELTS sections. But sometimes the most complex words don't really matter. Try to analyze the sentence structure. Think about what kind of answer you're looking for, and then try to understand how different parts of the sentence are related. For example, your question may be about whether a new scientific theory was accepted by other researchers. And you may read a sentence like, his research into something you don't understand, was immediately put under question by his colleagues. Is our statement true or false? Well, it's false. To put under question means not to accept. And if you don't really understand what the research was about, it doesn't matter. Another sign that you are lacking vocabulary is if you make more mistakes in section 3. This is the hardest part of the test. And if the size of vocabulary is the problem, the solution lies in learning more words. In this case, doing more and more practice tests won't bring the results because the strategy is not your problem. You need to concentrate on learning new words. Once you've analyzed your performance without time pressure, do another test in timed conditions and write down how much time you spent on each section. So, what happened to your performance? It's normal if you answer fewer questions with a time limit in place. The question is, how many? If your performance deteriorated a lot, this is something to work on. There are two main areas to address. The first is your time management. How much time did you spend on the first section, second, third? Remember that in each test, the first section is the easiest and the third is the hardest. If you spend 20 minutes on the first, you're compromising your performance on the third. Try to finish the first section in not more than 15 minutes, second in 20, and then you have 25 minutes for the most difficult questions. If your target is band 8 or higher, you should be able to finish the first section in less than 15 minutes and finish all 3 in about 50 minutes to have 10 minutes to look for answers to questions you couldn't answer straight away. Knowing which questions come in order and which don't, and having a strategy for each type of question can help you find your answers more quickly. The second biggest problem in IELTS reading after the size of vocabulary is the reading speed. There is a lot to read. And when we're learning a foreign language, we usually read trying to understand each word, and it becomes a habit. This is called intensive reading. It is very slow. This is when you read each word one by one, and when you don't understand something, you go back and read it again. This is not good for IELTS reading. In IELTS reading, you should use extensive reading to locate your answers. This is when you read faster without perhaps understanding everything, just getting the general idea. When you feel your answer is somewhere there, you slow down, switch to intensive reading, analyze the text, determine the answer, and then resume your extensive reading. How can you learn to read extensively? There are a few exercises. When you read each word, you pay a lot of attention to prepositions, articles, and other non-important words. We can actually see several words at a time, so try to read phrases. Another sign of intensive reading is if you pronounce each word in your head, or maybe even move your lips. Do you do that? You may be reading like this all the time and it slows you down. We can read faster than we can speak, so try to turn off the voice in your head. Conversely, when you need to concentrate on the meaning and pay maximum attention, move your lips reading each word. You'll also read faster if you stop rereading bits you couldn't understand straight away. Maybe they don't even matter and you're just wasting your time. Read looking for the answer to a particular question. And don't reread anything unless you think your answer is there. And the ultimate solution to reading faster is reading more. You know, the first time I started reading the Financial Times, I felt brain fried pretty soon. It was too much, but I persevered, and several months later I noticed that I can read it with no obvious problem. I got used to this level of complexity. You can find articles similar to IELTS reading if you go to BBC Science. It's free. Read your news in English, get your next book in English, and don't forget to learn new words along the way. Fundamentally, IELTS is an English language exam. If you work on the skills you're lacking, you will improve. And you will get to the level when you pass your test. Sometimes it just takes a bit more time than you might have expected. Be patient, and you definitely get there. I've selected the most common questions you asked me about IELTS reading. They are here and I'll answer them in today's video. Okay, let me answer each question one by one. The first question is it true that the first section may be more difficult than the last? So we're talking about IELTS reading. There are always 3 sections. And the first section is always the easiest, and the last is always the most difficult. It may be the case that some question in section 2 will be more difficult for you than some questions in section 3, but generally the last section is the most challenging. Can we switch between sections in IELTS reading and start with any part we like? Absolutely. As soon as the section begins, you can turn your pages as you wish. In a computer-based test, you can click on any question absolutely freely. But you should always start from the first section and then do the second and then the third, because each answer weighs 1 point. So it's best to get all the easy points first and then spend all the remaining time on the more challenging questions. Can I use the time from one reading section for another reading section, provided I finish the former very quickly? Yes, when you read IELTS reading instructions, you will see that you should spend 20 minutes on each section. But the truth is, you need more than 20 minutes for the third section. And perhaps, hopefully, you can finish the first in less than that. I would try to finish the first section in about 15 minutes, not more, 20 for the second and 25 for the third. Only in this case, you have the chance to answer those more difficult questions. If you can progress through the test even more quickly. And if you encounter a question you can't answer, don't lose too much time on it, just leave it, mark it to review. You may come back to it later and just move on to other questions you may answer more quickly. Okay. Do we get extra time to transfer our answers to the answer sheet? Or do we have to do that within our 60 minutes? Yes, you have to finish everything in 60 minutes. You're not gonna be given any extra time. And I know why there is this confusion. That's because in IELTS listening, you do get some extra time. But in IELTS reading, you don't. And you know, every time I take a paper-based exam, there are people who run out of time and they can't transfer all their answers. So they know what those answers are, they just can't mark them and they lose all those points. So it's a total catastrophe. That's why I think it's better to play safe. You finished your first section, transfer all the answers, except those you're not certain about. You finish the second section, transfer your answers. You finish the third section, transfer your answers. Then go back to those questions you couldn't answer straight away, in case the time runs out more quickly than you expected. Should we attempt all the questions in IELTS reading or only the ones we know the answers to? Yes, you should answer every question. You don't lose any points for incorrect answers. And for every question, you just have 4 options, sometimes only 3 options, so you have a good chance to guess correctly. So for those questions you're not certain about, when you don't have time to answer them, just select any answer. Is spelling important? Oh, yes. If you make a typo, it will be an incorrect answer. Particularly for those questions when you need to fill gaps, you usually need to find some complex words. Make sure you transfer those answers very carefully onto your answer sheet. And of course, if you take a computer based exam, it's a little bit easier for you because you can copy and paste the word, avoiding a possibility of a typo. Okay, the next question is, do true, false, not given questions come in order? As far as I know, yes. I've analyzed a number of official practice tests, and I've always paid attention how questions are located during my real exams. And it seems that true, false, not given questions do come in order. It means you can read the first question, find your answer, read the next question, find your answer, and so on. But quite often you have yes, no, not given questions at the end of your third section. So most likely those won't be in order. Answers for certain tasks come in order, right? That's right. So does the order start after every task, or does it continue from the point where the previous task's answer stopped? Yes, it continues throughout the passage. You read the question, find an answer, read the question, continue reading the text until you find an answer, and so on. Of course, it may be interrupted if you see a type of questions where answers don't come in order. For example, matching headings or matching paragraphs, matching sentence endings. Those questions don't come in order. Can I write answers in capital letters? Yes. Both in IELTS reading paper-based and computer-based, you can write your answers in capital letters or in small letters, or you can capitalize the first letter, whatever way you wish. Let's continue. Can I write on the question sheets? Yes. In the paper-based exam, I actually recommend marking your answers on the question sheets first. You can cross out incorrect options, you can mark questions for review, highlight keywords, and do whatever you wish. Then you simply transfer your answers to the answer sheet and no one will check your question sheet, so don't worry about that. Can we answer with just T, F, and G instead of true, false, not given? That's a common question, and I did my best to find an official answer we could rely on. But unfortunately, there is no such information available, it seems. To the best of my knowledge, you can. But if you read the instructions very carefully, you will see that you are supposed to answer true, false, not given, not T, F, and G. So to be 100% safe, I would write those words in full because it just takes you a few extra seconds. And of course, in a computer-based exam, you just click on the option and it's not a question anymore. Should we include articles in our answers? To be honest, I've never seen any article or preposition being used in IELTS reading. Usually you just need to find one word or two words. And if you are hesitating between one or two words, well, first check your instructions. Are you actually allowed to write two words? Because if you're only supposed to write one word and you write two, that's an incorrect answer. For example, you find the combination birthday party. So one word is party, two words, birthday party. Is it possible to underline keywords in the computer-based test? Yes, you can. So you just select your word or your phrase, right-click, highlight. And you can do it in your passage and in your questions as well. Are we allowed to use Ctrl F to search for words? Unfortunately not. This section is blocked, otherwise I guess it would be a little bit easier. But no, you can't do that. You can use two other combinations, Control C to copy a word and Control F to paste this word. That's useful for questions when you need to fill a gap. So when you find those words, you just copy them and paste. Can we see remaining seconds if we hover over the clock? Yes, again, that's a question about a computer-based exam. And that's a functionality I've just learned about, but I don't think that's particularly useful because it takes a bit of your time just to check it. And if you don't do that, you will only see minutes. So you will see 2 minutes left, 1 minute left, and then your screen gets locked. Do we get a pencil and paper in the computer-based test? Yes, you do. You get a sheet with instructions and you get a pencil. And you can write on this sheet, but I don't really see what you're gonna write there. I don't see any need. If you want to mark any questions for review, you can do it on the screen. What are the best preparation materials for the reading part? Okay, you will need some practice tests. And you should only take official practice tests because other tests are just different types of questions, different level of complexity. So these are the official books. The latest is number 15 and number 16 will be published in June 2021. So these are for academic students and you can find similar books for general training students. Then you also need to learn about IELTS reading strategies. And here I may appear immodest, but I suggest watching the videos in my IELTS reading playlist. You will learn about all the strategies for this exam. You will learn about strategies for the most difficult types of questions, such as true, false, not given, and matching headings. And then you will take your practice tests, and the rest will depend on how quickly you can read in English and how wide your vocabulary is. Could you recommend some materials, books and newspapers to improve my reading? Okay, that's if you have a bit more time before your exam. You should absolutely read in English. So for general training students, I think the best is to switch your life to English. Read instructions, news, job descriptions, read everything in English. These are the kinds of texts you will find during your exam. All students, general training and academic students, should read some news in English. The Guardian and BBC are free and excellent sources of all kinds of articles. For academic students, passages are going to be more academic, more scientific. So you should read some scientific articles, for example, the Science magazine, or simply the science section of the BBC website. How much should I read on a daily basis? Well, if you need to improve your reading skills, there is a good chance that you need to improve your writing and speaking skills too, and so you can't spend too much time on one section. You need to pay attention to each of them. And even if you read 20 minutes a day, 2 articles a day, that's great. Consistency is key. And of course, don't forget to learn new words from those articles. You don't have to learn all those words, only those which you think you're more likely to get in other articles, more common words you don't know. The next step in your preparation is practice. I suggest using the authentic practice tests from Cambridge English, which are just like the real exams. If you download my free IELTS study plan, you'll learn how to prepare for each section of your exam and get links to extra resources. And if the strategies we've covered in this lesson aren't sufficient to get you the score you need in IELTS reading, keep on working on your English skills. You'll find how in the study plan. Ultimately, your IELTS score depends on your English proficiency. And if you're not at the right level yet, keep on going and you'll get there. I hope you'll be able to pass your exam very soon. Good luck with your preparation and your exam. Bye!